You know what's funny about the Raiders? They've always been the bad guys, the outlaws, the team everyone loves to hate. But here's what people don't talk about. Sometimes their own fans hated them just as much. Tonight, I'm going deep into the names that made Raider Nation turn on their own, the draft picks that became punchlines, the stars who quit on the team, the coaches who burned it all down. And here's what might surprise you. Some of these guys, they actually earned their way back into fans' hearts. So buckle up. This one's gonna sting. The number one pick that became a nightmare. We have to start here. JaMarcus Russell. Just saying that name probably made some of you wince. I get it. Even now, almost 2 decades later, it hurts. Every franchise has draft busts. That's part of the game. You swing, you miss, you move on. But Russell wasn't just any miss. This was the first overall pick in 2007, the guy with the cannon arm from LSU. The quarterback who was supposed to resurrect the franchise and bring back the glory days. Al Davis watched Russell's tape and saw the future. Scouts were comparing his arm strength to legends. The hype machine was in overdrive. This wasn't hope. This was certainty. The Raiders were about to be saved, except they weren't. You know who else was available in that draft? Calvin Johnson, who became one of the greatest receivers ever. Joe Thomas, a future Hall of Fame tackle. Patrick Willis, Darrelle Revis. The Raiders could have had any of them. Instead, they got Russell. The red flags started immediately. He held out through training camp, missing crucial development time as a rookie. When he finally showed up, he was already behind the curve. Then came the regular season, and the nightmare went from bad to worse. Bad reads, hesitant throws, decisions that made you question if he was watching the same game everyone else was. And then came the weight gain started. Russell showed up looking less like an elite athlete and more like someone who'd discovered every buffet in Oakland. The whispers about his work ethic got louder every week. Was he studying film? Was he even trying? Then came the story that became legendary. Coaches allegedly gave him blank tapes just to test if he'd actually watched them. Russell came back saying he'd studied everything. The tapes were empty. Whether that story's true or not doesn't even matter anymore. It became the symbol of everything wrong with his tenure. A guy with all the physical tools who just didn't care enough. 3 seasons, 7 wins total. 23 interceptions against only 18 touchdowns. Those are numbers that get you benched in Madden. But here's what made it truly unforgivable for Raider Nation. It wasn't just that he failed, it's that he seemed perfectly fine with failing. No fire, no anger, no determination to prove everyone wrong. He collected his guaranteed money and looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. That betrayal still echoes through every draft discussion in Oakland. Russell didn't just set the franchise back, he made them the punchline of every draft bust conversation for the next decade. When a kicker destroyed everything in one night. Let me tell you about a game that still haunts some older Raiders fans. The name? Cole Ford. Most of you probably don't know who that is, and honestly, that's fair. He was a 7th-round pick in 1995, a kicker. Not flashy, not famous. For his first couple seasons, he did exactly what you want from a kicker. He made his kicks, and nobody talked about him. But then came 1997, week whatever, against the Kansas City Chiefs. Rivalry game, the kind that gets circled on the calendar, the kind where bragging rights last all year. Ford lined up for his first field goal attempt. Pushed it wide, okay? Rough start, but kickers miss. Shake it off. Second attempt, same result. Now the stadium's getting nervous. You can feel the tension building. Third try, no good. The crowd is absolutely losing it now. Then he missed an extra point. An extra point! By the end of the game, Ford had missed 4 field goals and that extra point. 5 opportunities to score points, and he hit 0. The Raiders lost that game, and it wasn't because the defense got shredded or the offense couldn't move the ball. They lost because their kicker had the worst game in franchise history when it mattered most. For a fan base that prides itself on toughness and clutch performance, that was unforgivable. This is Raider Nation we're talking about. The people who celebrate bone-crushing hits and ice-in-the-veins moments. Ford had neither. He was cut shortly after. His NFL career basically ended that night in Kansas City. But wait, the story gets darker. Years later, in 2004, Ford made headlines again, this time for firing a gun at the Las Vegas home of Siegfried and Roy, the famous entertainers. Court documents revealed a man who'd completely unraveled, convinced their magic shows were somehow corrupting society. For Raider fans, it turned an already infamous name into something genuinely disturbing. The kicker who choked in Kansas City had become someone struggling with serious demons. Sad, shocking, and impossible to forget. The superstar who just stopped trying, Randy Moss. Two words that still start arguments in Raider Nation. When Oakland traded for Moss in 2005, it felt like Christmas morning. This wasn't just another receiver. This was Randy frickin' Moss. The guy who'd made Minnesota's offense unstoppable. The man who made cornerbacks look like they were running in quicksand. The black hole went absolutely insane. Finally, after years of mediocrity, the Raiders had their game breaker back. Those first few games seemed to confirm it. Moss still had that explosiveness, that ability to take over a game. You could feel the electricity every time he lined up. Then, reality hit. The team started losing. The offense sputtered. And Moss, he quit. I don't mean he asked for a trade. He did that eventually. I mean, he mentally checked out while still wearing silver and black. His body language told the whole story. Jogging routes when he should have been sprinting, dropping passes that would have been routine catches 2 years earlier, standing still on plays where old Randy would have fought for extra yards. The interviews made it worse. Moss didn't even pretend to hide his frustration. He openly criticized the team's direction, the coaching, the whole organization. And watching this unfold, Raider Nation felt something they're not used to feeling: betrayed. This was the superstar they'd welcomed with open arms, and he was giving up on them in real time. By 2007, Moss demanded out. The Raiders traded him to New England. And this is where the knife really twisted. He immediately became unstoppable again. 23 touchdowns with Tom Brady, an NFL record, the greatest single-season receiving performance in history. The same guy who looked washed up in Oakland was suddenly back to being the best receiver on the planet. You want to understand what betrayal feels like? That's it. Moss had the talent the whole time. He just didn't care enough to use it for the Raiders. One fan captured it perfectly in a radio call. "We didn't get Randy Moss. We got his ghost wearing a Moss jersey. The real Randy showed up the second he put on a Patriots uniform." That memory still stings. Every time someone brings up the greatest Raiders receivers, Moss's name comes up with an asterisk and a whole lot of anger. The villains who made the Raiders infamous. Now let's talk about the guys who didn't just play for the Raiders. They became the embodiment of everything the team represented. Then Davidson was 6'8", rocked a handlebar mustache that belonged in a Western, and played like he was personally offended by opposing quarterbacks. In 1970, during a massive game against Kansas City, Chiefs quarterback Len Dawson slid to end the play. The whistle blew. Play over. Davidson hit him anyway. Full speed, full force, drove him back into the ground. What happened next was chaos. Chiefs players swarmed, punches flew, both benches emptied. The whole thing devolved into a full-scale brawl that cost the Raiders penalties and ultimately a shot at the playoffs. Did Davidson apologize? Absolutely not. He leaned into it, embraced being the bad guy, and in doing so, became one of the NFL's first true villains. Other teams hated him, but Raider Nation, they loved him for it. He was their outlaw. Then came Jon Matuszak in the late 70s and 80s. The Twos. 2 Super Bowl rings. A defensive end who was as wild off the field as he was dominant on it. Matuszak partied harder than anyone, fought with coaches, broke team rules constantly, and somehow still showed up on Sundays and destroyed opposing offenses. After football, his larger-than-life personality landed him in Hollywood. He played Sloth in The Goonies, which honestly tells you everything about his persona. Big, intimidating, but somehow lovable underneath. But the real story was darker. Matuszak's drug use and reckless lifestyle spiraled out of control. He died at just 38 years old. For Raider Nation, he's remembered as both a champion and a tragedy. A guy who lived the outlaw image to its extreme and paid the ultimate price. Jump ahead to 2019, vontaze burfict, the modern-day enforcer who took things way too far. His reputation for dirty hits and cheap shots had followed him from Cincinnati, and everyone knew signing him was risky. 4 games into his Raiders career, he delivered a helmet-to-helmet hit so vicious, the NFL suspended him for the entire season, the longest suspension for on-field conduct in league history. 4 games. That's all Raider Nation got from burfict. Another villain who burned out before the story even started. Davidson, matuszak, burfict. Different eras, same pattern. They weren't just players. They were lightning rods who carried the Raiders' dark reputation into every stadium, every headline, every controversy. The coaches who burned it all down. Sometimes the worst damage doesn't come from the players. It comes from the guys calling the shots. Josh McDaniels arrived in Las Vegas promising structure and discipline. What he delivered was chaos. Within months, players were being traded away. Locker room chemistry disappeared. Star receiver Davante Adams went from excited to frustrated to visibly miserable. And Raider Nation remembered. They'd seen this movie before. McDaniels had done the exact same thing in Denver. Clashed with players, made questionable trades, left the Broncos worse than he found them. History repeated itself in Vegas. Every week felt like proof the hire was a disaster. Social media turned into a non-stop roast session. The word instability became permanently attached to his name. Then there's Jon Gruden, the legend who returned with a 10-year contract and massive expectations. At first, it felt like destiny. Gruden was back to restore the silver and black to glory. Then those emails leaked. Racist, homophobic, offensive language that destroyed his reputation overnight. For Raider Nation, it wasn't just about losing a coach. It was the disgrace he left behind. The man they'd celebrated became a stain on the franchise. The quarterback who earned redemption. Let's end with the most fascinating story of all. Derek Carr. For years, Carr was the most polarizing figure in Raider Nation. Half the fan base saw him as the answer. The other half thought he'd never be good enough to compete with the legends of the past. The criticism was brutal. He was called soft, overrated, not a real Raider. Stats were decent, but playoffs were rare. Every loss felt like his fault. Every missed opportunity had his name attached to it. The hate was real and loud, but something shifted over time. Fans started realizing Carr wasn't the problem. The chaos around him was. Coaches rotated constantly. Offensive coordinators changed almost yearly. The roster was in perpetual rebuild mode. And through all that instability, Carr kept showing up, kept fighting, kept leading. By the time he left Oakland, polls showed nearly 80% of Raider Nation believed he should be remembered as a great Raider. The same quarterback who'd been booed was now being celebrated. Fans remembered that 2016 season when he was in MVP conversations before a devastating leg injury, the dramatic comebacks, playing through pain. Time gave perspective, and fans admitted maybe they'd been wrong. Carr went from villain to hero. That's how redemption works in Raider Nation. So, here's what we've learned tonight. Hate in the silver and black is complicated. These fans have witnessed greatness. They've seen legends in person. So when someone falls short, the reaction is volcanic. Sometimes unfair, always passionate. They demand everything because they give everything. But that same intensity that creates villains, it also creates redemption stories. The boos turn into cheers. The anger softens into respect. Yesterday's most hated becomes today's beloved. That's the beautiful chaos of being a Raiders fan. No middle ground. No lukewarm takes. Just pure, unfiltered passion. Love or hate. Black and silver. That's the only way they know. So here's my question. Who's your most hated Raider? The draft bust who wasted years? The coach who made you lose faith? The star who quit on the team? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely want to hear your story. Because with the Raiders, the drama never ends. The passion never fades. And honestly, we wouldn't want it any other way.